But when you step back, and I think this has just really helped me across areas of my life, not just my professional, but when I step back and I try to understand instead of seeking to be understood, just the solution just becomes so much more clear.
Welcome to the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. I have my friend and veterinarian Laci today. Laci is one of the most talented, caring, strong, and forward-thinking individuals I know in vet med. She is the definition of someone who thrives on learning and isn't afraid to pave a path if the right one is not there. She was the youngest chief of staff at Banfield. She started multiple businesses inside and outside of the veterinary industry, including Vet Live, an early telehealth platform. She is a forward thinker, often ahead of her time. As a warning, we do discuss suicide towards the end of the episode, so if you're not in a place to hear about that, please consider waiting to listen. Laci has grown from a lot of adversity and has much wisdom to share. So you have done a lot of different things in your career, and I think it's just easier if we start at the very beginning. So when did you know that you even wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
I remember having a Child of the Week poster and I know it was second grade because the teacher was on there, or Student of the Week. And, I said I wanted to be a veterinarian. So from very early days, I think I might have had an astronaut period, like as kindergartner or something, but I chose veterinarian and it stuck. So
nice. Well, so going into vet school, did you have an idea of what being a veterinarian was going to look like for you, or?
Well, I started working with a veterinarian. I think I was always a very serious-minded student. And, I knew getting into vet school was, supposed to be very difficult. So I started working with a mobile vet when I was in the 5th grade. And I'm sure that was probably not exactly legal. But
I have to say, I'm impressed. Wow.
But I traveled around with her and I cleaned some kennels and we declawed cats on her kitchen table. And I washed needles and syringes. Yes, I washed needles. So this is, way old school veterinary medicine. When I was hooked, and I did grow up from that point on, I stayed in the veterinary hospital, and I was kind of determined to set myself apart a little bit from the applicant pool. And so I managed to find a path to go to college early. And I graduated from Tulane when I was 19. And that was just, a thing that I think helped me stand out. And I applied to 19 vet schools my senior year because everyone says, oh, it's just impossible. And I really wanted to get in, and I was accepted to a number, and, thrilled to find an opportunity. I went to Texas A&M and I entered my first year as a DVM PhD candidate. And that was the first year they were trying that program, and they actually cut the program. It lost its funding before I graduated. But that's okay. It actually ended up being a really good thing, I think. But I wanted to do a PhD in virology, actually.
So did you think you would specialize in virology too? Like go on and do more with that?
I did not think I wanted to be a traditional vet. I wasn't sure. I thought I was interested in lab animal medicine and being involved in the research on animals. And I thought, being a virus hunter sounded I just thought it sounded like the coolest thing in the world. So I didn't want to be a traditional vet. I was not entirely sure, by the time I started going through vet school, I wasn't entirely sure what my path would be, but I didn't think it would be traditional.
Yeah. Well, I was reading that you actually kind of designed your 4th year to be a little bit of a unique track for yourself. So I have heard other people do that, which I think is a great way to really customize what fits you, and especially young when you're trying to figure things out. So can you talk more about that, how you kind of designed your 4th year?
I just, I've never really been one to take the path that's available if I know it's not the one I want.
Good for you.
And it wasn't the one I wanted. So I came up with my own and I presented it to the higher ups at the vet school and I petitioned and they approved. And I was able to go around to some fantastic universities and just research institutes. I spent some time at City of Hope in Los Angeles and Johns Hopkins and University of Michigan and Columbia University. So I spent much of my fourth year, I think I spent 5 months traveling and doing these externships. And it was a really fantastic experience.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. So doing that kind of help you understand a little bit more about what you wanted to do after vet school?
I thought. Uh, I did stay on the research track and I applied to Hopkins for a fellowship and a PhD program. And it's, just where I fell in love with, and they had a wonderful virology and comparative medicine program there. And I did not get in. I was their first alternate. It was just a one seat position that they have. It was, NIH funded. And that was a big letdown. And I had to shift and decide, what to do. So I talked with, a number of mentors that I had met along the way. And people said, go out and practice for a year, reapply if it's still your passion, but you never know. And I did. I went out, I practiced for a year at a high volume practice in Ohio. And I was the head of the exotics department. And that was a lot of fun.
Oh,
And
wow.
my thought process, I did like, learning about all these new species, but I thought I'm also going to get a lot of more experience with, the gerbils, mice, rats, that could be applicable, if I did want to stay on the track and apply to Hopkins again. It was a, baptism by fire. I remember July 4th weekend, I was on call and I had a GDV come in and I'm the only vet and I've been practicing less than a month. So I called Texas A&M vet school and had them on the phone talking to me. And that's so kind and amazing of them to do that. And then one of my techs in the OR had the book open for me. And that's how I got myself and that patient through that surgery. So,
Wow. Yep. Vets, we figure it out. So
yes. Yep. Vets just find a way to make it happen. So it was a great experience at that practice. And I just was really thrown into a lot, which was scary at the time. And, I don't think it's how medicine, the transition happens too often anymore, which is probably for the best. Um, but I learned a tremendous amount, gained a lot of skills and confidence that would have taken years. So I'm grateful for that.
yeah. And then from there, you moved to another vet hospital. Is that correct?
Yeah. During my first year, I became interested in the business side. And, I was very curious. My boss at my first practice would, send us some very basic handwritten reports at the end of each month. And I became really interested in, learning how to read a P&L. And that led me to want to have my own practice. And so I actually joined Banfield. And this was back in the days before Mars came in. And I had a partner hospital in Brandywine, Delaware. And then I decided I wanted a second partner hospital. And I opened that one. And that was a lot of fun because, it was mine from the beginning. And yeah, I did that for a number of years. I had both of those hospitals and I was just kind of running back and forth between the two and very much enjoyed the aspect of it was a little bit of partner ownership, with the security of, not actually having to buy the hospital. And it was a very good experience, learned how to manage and to build a team, so some of those things I hadn't been able to do as an associate vet.
Yeah. Oh goodness, those are just like life skills too. So sound like you really started to enjoy the business aspect of veterinary medicine in addition. And it sounds like you were doing really well, building teams, running multiple hospitals, and you're still really young. I mean, as in like, well, just young in general, but I mean, new out of vet school. I mean, you hadn't been out very long. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I was 22 when I graduated vet school,
Wow.
23 when I got my first partner hospital, and then I was their youngest chief of staff. And I guess I've just always not necessarily liked, I think of rules, because they had requirements for chief of staff. You have to be here for so long. And I was like, well, I think if I can meet, certain, targets that you guys approve upon, then we should be able to accelerate this. And you don't know unless you ask. And I've tried to do that. And that's what I did. So I made chief of staff in record time. And it's just, it's been a very good life lesson. And, one I kind of came about without even realizing really what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
Well, I did not realize that your negotiation skills go back so far. So that is wonderful. Well, I mean, it sounds like you may have learned that lesson early on, but was there a hard part of learning how to not be afraid to ask, kind of stick up with yourself, or did you feel like that came pretty naturally for you?
no, it's scary every time. Absolutely. No, it's something I'm even now in situations that, I don't like conflict. Um, so it's always scary. And it's something, I take a lot of time to pause before and think, okay, is this really, the direction I want to point my vessel? And if it is, I have to stay true to myself and at least try. If you don't try, then that opportunity is going to pass you by. And when you find the courage, at least I found, when I find the courage to pursue it earnestly and to ask in a way that isn't arrogant, and I have to
Right.
examine it and make sure that, that my reasoning is pure, then oftentimes you'll be really surprised.
Well, so when did you decide to be even more non-traditional and start to get into very entrepreneurial endeavors? Because you've done a lot with different starting your own businesses and supporting other startups and entrepreneurial endeavors. So how did that bridge happen?
Well, when I was, discovering the aspects of practice that I loved the most, I loved empowering my staff and getting them, you know, on board with the mission, or, finding a part of, working that they could be really ignited by. And something that became important, and thinking in particular of my team in Whitehall, Pennsylvania, I became passionate about what I call the $4 program for prescription drugs. And I'm sure you're familiar with generic human drugs that are available from Target, Publix, Walmart, Costco, you name it. You can get so many of them. Some of them are now free. But back then it was a month supply, of the human, strength or prescription amount for 30 days for $4. And my staff and I, we started offering this to clients. Say, well, we can, order you veterinary formulation, or, here's one that is, it's generic. You're going to have to cut the pills in half. Sometimes you didn't need to. And it didn't work in every case because you have, small dogs, or just dosages that are just drastically different between pets and people. But that became a theme of our hospital that really separated us. Clients loved it. It showed them that we really were not in it for the money. And it's a shame that, a lot of clients do think that, but it's reality. And it let us use their money, their funds that they had on the actual diagnostics that the pet needed. So this freed up space so we could take radiographs, we could do blood work. And, people weren't spending $100 on an antibiotic. The pet was getting better care. It was just better all around. The staff loved it because it empowered them. They could talk with pet owners about, why we need to do this. And just everyone was happier. Clients were happier because they felt like we were being honest and saving them money. And it was just so good for morale all around. So I became really passionate about, finding these little ways to personalize medicine and communicate with clients, and also kind of go against the grain of, the traditional thing is, oh, let's just, throw Rimadyl at this, and the client then doesn't have the money for, appropriate diagnostics that you do in an ideal world. And we started doing a lot of custom tailored client handouts, discharge summaries, and loved that. When I transitioned from Ohio to Delaware and Pennsylvania for the hospitals, I had clients follow me.
Wow.
For the client communication. And I just wanted to find a way to offer this kind of communication with pet owners on a bigger basis. Banfield was also starting to shift at this point. It was feeling much more corporate, and I didn't like that. So I was able to come up with this idea of what I didn't know was telehealth at the time, because I don't think telemedicine, we didn't know that word back then. So this was back around 2010 that I was writing a business plan and, sought out resources at the SBA because I didn't know what I was doing. But, that's when you get to learn and to ask others who know a lot more than you do. And the idea was for a 24/7 veterinary advice and to be available to people worldwide. And it was internet based, and it was just so much fun to do. I stepped away from the hospitals full time, and the $4 program was one of my things that I was so excited to share with the world. Amongst other things, it's nice to be an unbiased second opinion. I think people really value that. And I really enjoy walking the line of pushing the industry, but making sure it's the right direction. Like you're not pushing it in a way that's bad for pets or their owners, because you have two clients. One is a client, one's a patient, but you have two people or two beings, you have to keep in mind. And so that's what Vet Live was back in the day. It was that first, there's got to be a way to connect with more people and to do good on a bigger scale. And yeah, it was, very much a dream, and a lot of my thoughts were naive. And that's a really cool place to be because you don't get it back. You do learn, but you never get that back.
Yeah. That's a very interesting statement that I have definitely thought about before is sometimes when you know too much, it actually holds you back from doing a lot.
Mhm.
So you said 2010. Is this around the time you decided to go to law school?
No, that was more
Okay.
recent.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. I'm off on my dates. Okay. Well, we can get there. So, and when did you meet your husband? Because he's as a vet too. We meet other vets. So when did you meet your husband?
I met him in 2007,
Okay.
and we married almost a year to the day later.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know why we were in such a rush, but we were.
When you know, they say. So why wait? Well, oh, very cool. So was he at Banfield as well, or was that right before?
He had been at Banfield,
Okay.
but he had stepped away and he was going and he was getting his MBA.
Okay.
So
So
he
very
was not practicing anymore.
So also another business person because or business thinking and also helped in a lot of the entrepreneurial businesses as well. So from the telehealth business, and you started to talk about being naive. So if you want to elaborate more on that to kind of explain where you went to next.
Oh, well, when we launched, we weren't sure if we were going to be indexed by Google right away, how soon the questions were going to start rolling in. And I don't remember when I got my first question, but it was not the first day. It was probably the first week, but they trickled in
Yeah.
slowly. So it was definitely ahead of its time,
Yeah.
which I don't think is always a bad thing. It's probably not the best if your primary motive is, financial. It's not great to be that ahead of the curve, but it was a wonderful experience. I had Vet Live for a number of years and it wasn't fully paying the bills. So I had to do other side hustles. I started writing, started a veterinary marketing firm that was a total bust, started a Philly meal deals.com site. You remember in the Groupon
Yeah.
phrase. Yep. And that was my first acquisition. Actually made just a little bit of money. So then we moved to Florida. For my late husband got a job down here. And I was doing Vet Live. And then I was one of the co-founders of a veterinary digital marketing agency. And that picked up steam much more quickly than Vet Live, although Vet Live was gaining a lot of traction by this point, because it had been around a while. We had developed some just really symbiotic partnerships over the years. Embrace Pet Insurance was the first big home run. And that was something I just thought, there's got to be a way to take the nurse's hotline of your insurance, that's what it was back in the day, and apply that to Vet Live apply it to the pet telehealth, because we had seen how much money it saved pet owners. So often they just don't know if they need to go to the emergency clinic, or it also saves money because they don't know if they should go to the clinic. But when they do need to go, the sooner you get there, like the less expensive the bill's going to be. If you sit around and wait, it's going to be, you're going to have to do much more diagnostics. And, that's not even addressing the pet's prognosis goes down. So it's much better all around. And especially, adding that onto an insurance company with the business side, it's a win, and the cost saving and what a value add for the pet owners. Rover.com was another relationship that just made a lot of sense. And I think we had the relationship with Embrace, it was over 5 years. And Rover, I think it was closer to 8 or 9 years. So those were good, longstanding relationships. Pretty cool. And, now most pet health insurance companies do offer some sort of vet on call service. Mm-hmm. And that was my idea. Not that it's a unique idea, but I put it into motion the first time.
Yeah. Well, it does sound like you were very ahead of your time. And like you said, if you're looking to make a gazillion dollars, it's not the best, but it just shows that you are such a forward thinker and an action taker on top of it. Hi, we'll be back with the second half of the show after this quick break. But first, I wanted to take a moment and thank you for listening to the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. If you're enjoying the show, the best way to support us is to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps us to reach more listeners, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And now back to the episode. So, with all of these businesses, when you're thinking about lessons learned that you feel are important for others in the veterinary community to also understand, what would you say are some of those lessons?
you've got to know your why. You can't just create a business without a problem, and you have to be passionate about it. Slow down, take a big pause. I think I did take many risks, but I evaluated them thoroughly. And I didn't just evaluate it, I had them evaluated by people that were a lot smarter than me.
Mm.
So that for me has been critical because, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And of course, I'm not the first person to say that, but it holds very, very true. And when you go out as an entrepreneur, Vet Live was fully self funded. I didn't make anything for, well over a year. You just put things back in the business. So really slowing down and, you have to be passionate about it but because otherwise there's no one to hold you accountable to getting out of bed each day. And that is, it's really true for everyone. We have to be accountable to show up to work, but it's just escalated when you decide to go into business for yourself.
Yeah. We were talking about you don't want to be a traditional veterinarian and the importance of having a why when you make decisions. So almost like on a personal level, what are your values and your why to know what your North Star is, if that makes sense?
That does. Growth has been very important to me my whole life. And I'd say learning new things is my favorite thing about this career path. It's definitely pushed me outside of my comfort zone, which is where I think the real growth happens. Not that you can certainly grow when you're content and comfortable, but, the big hard growth. And that's something that is, personally growth, everyone may not value that as much as I do. But I know that I need that. And if I'm not growing and learning new things and being challenged in that way, then I'm going to lose steam and motivation and get a little bit bored probably and just not be my best version. As it applies to our industry, I love being part of the progression of things that need to change. Just even, my first year out, I'm so glad that that's not how it is anymore. I don't regret my first year as an associate vet, but I'm so glad that these new grads are speaking up and demanding a way to actually integrate life alongside the career because you can't really separate them. But when I graduated, that wasn't an option. It was just you're going to work your tail off and you're not going to complain about it. You're not going to get paid hardly anything. And the industry shifted so much. And it's not just our industry, the conversations that we're having as a society in whole. I think those are really important, especially the hard topics.
Yeah. You said it a little while ago that you appreciate change and you want to grow, but you're also a person who wants to really stop and think about it. It's not like you want things to change just to change or that you just want to be a disruptor. It's because you actually kindly stop and think about what truly needs to change and what could truly be the right direction. So, what are some of the things that you see need some of the biggest touch when it comes to change to make the profession better?
Well, I hope that no one will crucify me for saying this. I like, I love animals. I adore them. I wouldn't be a veterinarian if I didn't love animals, but I also love people. And I place a very high value upon human life. And I think so often veterinarians, and I understand why right now it's such a time to be in the trenches of our industry. And I think that can be said for a lot of service industries right now. It's not just a veterinary problem. But we are, I think, when we dig in our heels and insist about being vet centric, vet-centric schedules, vet-centric services that we're going to offer, vet-centric drugs that we're going to offer. And we're not going to script out a generic drug because we want that money that we're making from our pharmacy. I think that's a shift that is good, that needs to happen, because we are just, that viewpoint is just thinking about yourself. You've got to understand your client, and I'm not by any means do I believe that we need to just bow down to clients and give them whatever they want. We, don't need to sacrifice our mental health or schedules just to form our worlds around clients. But you have to think about the client's problem and the client's budgetary restrictions and, their concerns. Their main concern may be quality of life. It may not be, there's a number of things. But when you step back, and I think this has just really helped me across areas of my life, not just my professional, but when I step back and I try to understand instead of seeking to be understood, just the solution just becomes so much more clear. So some of those things that, if thinking about how the industry is going to shift from, vets kind of digging in their heels. And again, I think it just makes the problem worse. Trying to do things and hold on to the way we want them to be, it's just wasted effort. And it makes, I think it's making your life worse in general when you do that. Instead of realizing, okay, we do need to adapt, do need to start looking at alternative models for the future. Like, if vets are so overwhelmed, why are we fighting vaccine clinics so much? What alternatives are there? Such as, before COVID, veterinarians by and large were so anti-telehealth. And of course, that is not across the board. There were exceptions and forward thinkers, but everyone was so threatened by it. And they just didn't stop to think, this could make my life better if I learn how to embrace it as a part of, veterinary medicine as the greater whole, not just think of it as a competitor to my clinic, because it's not supposed to replace in-person brick and mortar medicine. It's just supposed to complement it. When we can shift that mindset and think about having hospitals that are more client-centric and staff-centric, I think when you can put those as your goals, then you'll find your own life is better because you're not fighting everyone all the time. I don't think the future of veterinary medicine is going to slow down. I think the new generations are, absolutely going to drive it forward. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, your own example, when you were talking about implementing the $4 prescriptions and the client handouts, and you said your clients followed you. You moved states and they followed you. And so that just goes to show that you grew business by trying to listen to their needs and offer them solutions. In business, we always think about your audience, right? Those are our clients. So think about the client that we're trying to serve and how can we truly serve them best and be creative with those solutions.
It's so true. And, and the client, also, being the pet got such better medicine. And at that time in my career, I was setting every single record at Banfield, financially speaking. I was, just week after week, it was amazing. And we didn't have to worry anymore. It was fun. It was fun. It made it fun because we looked at the problem and stopped trying to fit something. We just said, okay, what can work? And you really have to let go of old ideas and routines and just really say, okay, what other options are there? So many times you have to talk, or I think, we need to get out of our industry a little bit and look at how other industries do it. Being in veterinary medicine, I like to look at human medicine because they're ahead of us, and we can look to, find parallels, what works, what didn't work. We don't have to invent anything new, but we can learn so much from their mistakes.
Well, going back to your value of growth and learning, and I completely agree that we need to kind of just stop and listen a lot of times, and including listening to people that are maybe more outside of our direct profession, whether it's human health. But I'm just really fascinated about you going to law school. So I'm so intrigued because I also want to advocate for veterinary voices in different places. So it's really highlighting this collaboration of veterinary medicine with all the other things in life that are all part of what we do. And so you, unlike a lot of veterinarians, have pursued learning more about law and legal things, which I think is so important. Important for a couple reasons. One, because it impacts our lives, but two, I think so many people, and I'm not going to lie, including myself, are a little scared by legal, right? We're so nervous we're going to get sued for something. So I'm really intrigued. What led you to decide to go to law school? And what have you learned in that process?
That was a very thought out decision. It's got a couple of different layers and it's pretty personal. So I lost my husband in 2015 and he died by suicide. My son was barely 2 years old at that point, and it was it was obviously a huge loss. It was one I did not expect or have a clue was coming. And it just ripped up my foundation. I stayed, I didn't take a single day off, I remember the morning of his passing, a wise neighbor came over and he said, if you can, keep going with your business each day, don't stop. You may find it's hard to get back in it if you stop. And that's what I did. I kept going every day. And I'm not saying that that's the right thing for, everyone or, it's just what I did. I'm not even sure if it was the right thing, but it definitely was it, it was a blow to my self-esteem and how I defined myself. There has been a lot of dialogue around mental health and suicide since then, but in 2015, it was still a taboo subject. And when people did say things about it, oftentimes they weren't kind. There's a lot of shame associated with it. And I really wanted to do something fresh. I knew I had always been really good at school. So I wanted to do something to kind of build myself back stronger. And I wanted to also, I was still passionate about telehealth. I still had that live, and I wanted to kind of reinvigorate myself. And, I'd been doing the hands-on part of Vet Live and running, operations and done the marketing aspects of it. But I wanted to actually learn about it, about the industry of telehealth. And Wake Forest was a program in the country that had like a top-notch legal professor on telehealth. And he's, headline speaker. And just like you mentioned, Megan, the law intimidated me so much. I was scared of it. And I had shifted from having a two-parent household and, a partner in, negotiating and, even when you have a handyman come to the house, like my husband was the one who dealt with him. I now was doing everything. And I had to learn how to not be intimidated by this and to know, what my rights were. I had an incident when I was remodeling my house. And this was after my husband had passed. And I ordered this custom hood and I had just this grand vision for it. And it came with this seam just ever so slightly off the center. And, I tried to get them to replace it because it's just an eyesore. And they said, oh, it's within, normal variations. And I was intimidated and I just was quiet, and it was a very expensive hood. And it just drove me crazy seeing this hood every day in my kitchen. And I just said, I have to figure out how to turn this into something good. And one of the things that I had an interest in was contract law. It's like I sign so many contracts every day. I never know what my actual rights are, and I want to learn. So between that and, finding, a school that had the telehealth professor, I was like, I want to go and study under him and learn what we've learned in the human medical field and what can apply, and just open up my mind to the possibilities. And that's why I went. So it's partly telehealth and partly a defective hood in my kitchen.
Wow. Okay. So you went to learn. So what did you learn for not necessarily about the hood, but about telehealth and probably other things too.
Yeah. Well, I think I learned partly just to believe in myself. I was in classes with, people that had far more experience in the law than I did. Was the only one in medicine. So I learned how to speak an entirely new tongue. Trying to speak legalese, it was incredibly overwhelming, and it was so daunting my first semester. I took, I learned about the Constitution. I learned that is a terribly dull class, con law. um, I learned, I do love contract law. I love negotiations, which is just interesting because I guess I kind of always did want to kind of push the envelope and negotiate for what I wanted, although I wouldn't have considered it negotiations at the time. So I just learned, more grit, how to sit down and grab your resources, gather experts, mentors, and to really apply yourself. And I was working. I had my son as a single parent with no family nearby, and, in law school. So I really got good at multitasking.
I bet. Wow. Well, I kind of feel like we've come a little full circle on your journey and your values. And the thing that I love so much is that you continue to do such good in the world and to continue to keep pressing with helping others in our profession, the consulting work that you do, all the journalism that you do as well. I find fascinating. You've really been able to stay curious and find different things to do. It sounds like we get along or are very similar in that we like to do a lot of different things. So,
Yes.
um, multitask very well because you're a stellar mom too. So before we have our final four questions, you have so much wisdom, and I want to make sure to just kind of open it up. Is there anything else I should have asked, or that you have on your heart that you would like to share with the profession at this time?
One of the things that's helped me the most is learning the power of the pause and what that really means, and the permission to take a long pause. I know we have so many burnt out colleagues, and everyone feels pressure to move quickly and to add to their resume, or to, land the next associate position. And I think really slowing down and evaluating yourself and figuring out your priorities, that's been so helpful to me. It gives me permission to respond instead of reacting. And I think that's been just incredibly helpful on many, many areas of my life.
Yes, and in all sizes, right? So it could be just pause before you respond to a client
Mhm.
or before you walk in or talk to your spouse or before you make a big life decision like a different career, something like that. So yeah,
Yeah. And
absolutely.
it's not always about pausing to, you know, calm your temper or something like that. It can also be pausing to say, you know what, I do need to draw this boundary. And that's a hard one for veterinarians to learn, that boundaries are healthy. It's at least been tough for me. And I think we tend to be an empathetic group on the whole. So learning your own worth, you don't have to be pushed around by anyone. So
Exactly. Oh, well, that was wonderful. So to wrap up our time together, I have a final four questions. So the first one is, what is something people may get wrong about you?
hmm, I would say I love to eat. I love to try new foods. And in particular, I love spicy food. So
Mm,
when I go to restaurants and, I'll say, Thai hot or, go to an Indian restaurant and like, I really want it hot. I've learned to say these key phrases like I'll say pet mak mak. I'll say it in their native tongue to let them know, hey, this woman means business. Like
I
bring
can
on the
handle my heat.
yes.
That's
So that
awesome.
always surprises people that, oh, this white woman wants, really spicy food. Yes.
I love that. Don't underestimate you. Have you heard of it's a YouTube show, but it's called Hot Ones?
I haven't.
No? Oh, you might appreciate this. So this guy interviews big time celebrities and he makes them eat hot wings. So there's 10 wings and 10 different sauces, and
Uh-huh.
they increase in heat as they go. So he's doing a very good interview. Like he's asking very good questions, but they're having to eat these really spicy foods along the way. It's hilarious. So you have to check out the YouTube TV show Hot Ones. You might
I'll
like
have to look into it.
it.
Yeah, I've won some wing eating contests and a habanero pepper eating contest. It was a
Wow.
how many can you eat in a minute? That was in New Orleans, and I ate 14 in a minute.
Wow. Well, if people did not respect you before now, they definitely do now.
If
um,
respect is based on how many hot peppers you can eat.
that is amazing. And it kind of goes into the second question, which is, what is a hidden skill or interest you have?
Oh, I don't know that that qualifies as a skill. See, I'm rather musical. I
Oh,
I grew up playing the piano, and I've performed in Carnegie Hall twice. So
that's impressive. That
yeah,
is really cool.
piano and viola. I was never very good at viola. I used to go out in the barn and practice, and the horse that we had two horses, one in her stall would go to the opposite corner, and the one that was out to pasture would go at the far end of the field. I was much better at piano, and I studied harp. I wanted to learn harp, and I took the opportunity in undergrad to start taking harp lessons. So
Oh, well, that is really cool. So, of all these really cool things that you've done, is there anything still on your bucket list?
you know, I don't subscribe to just the theory of the bucket list.
Okay.
I like to just have goals and make them happen. And that's how I'm trying to raise my son. And so I try to, live a life that, is with purpose, with intention, and, constantly examine myself and, take inventory and, make sure I'm think that I'm doing a good job of that. So a life well lived, continual growth. Of course, there are goals that I'm starting to study Spanish again. I minored in undergrad and I've just completely let it go. So that's just a real actionable thing that I want to do right now. And, there's always trips to be had and, new culture to experience. But I don't like putting them on a bucket list because then when you cross them off, like what's left? So
You like good growth. It's a constant goal and next thing. So that makes complete sense for you. Absolutely. The final question is, what is something you are most grateful for?
the easy answer would be my son. Being his mom is the greatest blessing of my life. But I'm really most grateful for the adversity that I've faced. I don't think that anything else would have forced me to, and I guess it didn't force me to, I chose because it is always a choice. but it put me in a position where I was going to choose to just completely, scrap the foundation. It wasn't strong enough, and to just reevaluate how I was living my life. And I don't mean that like I was living my life, like a terrible life. I just wanted to live one where my vessel was always pointing where I wanted it, and live with more intention and a life of loving and serving others. And part of that is, the veterinary industry.
This has been the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. Whether you are listening or watching on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please make sure you are subscribed to catch all these amazing people in our profession. Also, send this episode to someone you think who would appreciate it. Have a recommendation for someone who would be a good guest? Please reach out on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. There aren't that many Dr. Sprinkles. Until next time, Vet Lifers.